everyone. Today we have our another new episode, and we will discuss on mental health and behavior. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. David Smith, and Madam Ali Rice. First, I would like to give chance Mr. David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you so much. This is a topic that's close to my heart because I've been involved with this for decades and have actually sat on boards at the Austin State Hospital, which deals with this, and on other organizations too. And in my company, we have one of our companies which actually deals in mental health and social emotional learning. So it's very, very important to me. But let me start at a basic level on this. Uh, let's start with what is mental health. And mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It really affects how we think, how we feel, how we act. It also heavily influences our behaviors. For example, how we handle stress, how do we relate to others, and we make healthy choices. And it's important at every stage in our lives, and it has important differences as we go through uh, every stage in our life too. And although they're similar and oftentimes used interchangeable, mental health and mental illness are not the same. A person can experience poor mental health and not be diagnosed as mental illness. Likewise, a person diagnosed with a mental illness can experience great periods of physical, mental, and social well-being. And so you begin to understand that. Let me also then take a minute and describe behavioral. And Sharif, I'm assuming you mean behavioral health in the title of what you want us to do today. So I'm going to go ahead and talk behavioral health as part of mental health. Behavioral health usually refers to mental health and substance abuse disorders, life stressors, and crisis-related physical symptoms. Behavioral health care refers to prevention, the diagnosis, and treatment of those. And uh, even though they're very similar, they are different. And for example, some of the experts in the United States, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration say 1 in 5 adults in the United States have clinically significant mental health uh, or substance abuse disorder. And it has been increasing sharply in children and teens. And I've seen that personally there. And we see different ways that can be done and how do we incorporate and deal with them. But, you know, there's things that we can go back and forth on these. For example, the things I like about behavioral health, Sharif, is it's inclusive. Health includes not only ways of promoting well-being by preventing or intervening, but it also helps intervene in substance abuse and other addictions, which oftentimes lead to other things. Uh, and perhaps even the term behavioral health is less of a social negative than mental health. So it's a kinder, gentler name that might work with more people. And behavior is an aspect of identity that can be changed. So people can say that behavioral health is more hopeful for people who experience because they know it can be changed. Uh, and there's some other things on it. It doesn't, behavioral health doesn't seem to talk to some root causes. That might be mental, it might be just a low self-esteem or other thing of it. And you understand that and how they put together. Um, and you see that. So as we look at some of the others, some of the things that can cause both mental health and behavioral health are disorders really go from very mild to very severe that affect a person's thinking, their mood, their behaviorals. And some of these factors might include biological factors, such as genes, brain chemistry, uh, things that were genetically inherited from the birth mother and the birth father can cause some of this. Can be life experiences, particularly such as trauma, abuse. I have seen uh, half a dozen of my friends where the life experiences was what has pushed them into behavioral and mental health crisis. It also is it can be genetically, so there can be a family history of mental health problems, and you understand those going well forward. The one thing you will begin to see with people who have both behavioral health and mental health issues and is they do not like change. They like to be in a set routine and work through that. Anytime change increases anxiety, which depending on the type of behavioral health issue or mental health issue, it can cause escapade events and even total meltdowns and extremely severe episodes. So a lot of different areas there, Sharif. Um, the big thing I would tell you is that it takes a team to deal with these. It takes doctors, psychologists, uh, it takes family involvement. The person has to stick to a treatment plan. They cannot be on it, then off of it, then on it. It will cause them to go out of it. You have to practice good self uh, care. Sleep is very important, but one of the biggest things is developing coping skills for how to deal with it. I had a friend I was helping who had two of her children, one of them severely affected by mental health, and you just had to help him cope. Sometimes you had to just take him, wrap yourself around him, and hold him when he was having an episode for him to regain control. Sometimes you had to tell him to breathe because with his condition, he would forget to breathe, and that would cause other episodes. So it really does take that whole team to address these issues. But Sharif, I think that's a good start for me.
Thank you. Now I request Madam Ali Rice.
Okay, so I took a slightly different view on it actually, but interestingly, following up on David's comments, Jason, my husband, used to be a psychiatric nurse for years, for over 10 or 15 years, and he was in a lock-in unit, and essentially most of the people that were affected, it was actually as a result of substance abuse. So and also a lot of people, when they thought they were getting better, if they stopped taking their meds, they'd kind of revert back to how they were. So I think it's in extreme cases, it's really, really tough. And also definitely in the system in the UK, that there's no division between, when people suffer. So we were doing some mural work in the mental hospital when he was working there. And there was a guy that was really traumatized and quite aggressive in the same unit as a little old lady that was in her 80s that had depression because her granddaughter had died when she was only 1 or 2. And essentially, from my perspective, that wasn't going to help anyone if there was no kind of. I don't think they kind of. I think everyone was put in the same, in the same area, and not kind of. I don't think it was individualized care really. So, and that was kind of very extreme. So I think my view actually, I was going to start with a quote, and it was: if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. And if you're at peace, you're living in the present. And I think I do a lot of yoga and meditation. And I think the kind of key skill to kind of cope with whatever life's got to throw at you is to try and stay in the moment. So, and I think mental health is kind of a process really. And particularly since 2020, there's so much anxiety that's really it's really, I can't say the word, really increased, particularly in young people, since we got locked down and people were put in isolation. And that's also across the board in all ages. So I think mental health in the general global population has massively been impacted since the lockdowns. And for me, as a creator, I think my kind of magic place has always been where the uncertainty is. And I think most people like things to stay the same. And Jason and I are naturally both creative, and so are our kids. And I think it's that kind of that kind of possibility for change that's exciting as opposed to the routine. But most people prefer to know what's going to happen, and so I think there's lots of different aspects to this. And I also think I've had mental health issues years and years ago, and one of the things that's really interesting to me is actually the wound is where the gift is really. So as Leonard Cohen wrote, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And I think the thing is, you don't realize how strong you are until you've been in quite a dark place, I think. So it's kind of, you find the light through the darkness. And so, and that's I think for me, having a natural sense of self and confidence to be who you are, as opposed to spend your time comparing and contrasting whatever, is really key. And there's also, in the early years, I think that what defines us is those first formative years, those first 7 years of life, set patterns in the way we behave, in the way we function, and the way we connect. And there's also, obviously, if you're introverted, it feels much harder to kind of reach out and find your voice until you kind of gain the confidence to be, so I think there's lots of aspects to it. But for me, I attended a webinar this morning, actually, and they were talking about how, now it was actually with James Hamilton, and he was talking about, at the moment, we've never had such a high kind of distrust of governments and power and the decisions that are being made around us. And the things that we need are collaboration, connections, and community. And we're lucky to live in a really rural area that looks out for each other. And I think the thing is that kind of community connection, and obviously within family units as well, if you've got a strong family unit that holds together, that kind of provides the foundation. So, and some people don't have that. So I think the thing is, I guess for me, mental health really is kind of feeling kind of safe and supported, being fulfilled in life, and also kind of having purpose. And I think the thing is, so for me, mental health and behavior, all of that kind of determines how we are, how we behave, how we connect with people, and the choices we make. So, and they all kind of probably stem from our experience as children and how we're treated as well. So, I've worked in education for more than 30 years, and there's a massive difference between children that are supported and children that aren't. So I think, the foundations start from the very beginning, and people break the mold, but those kind of patterns are kind of quiet and built really. So I think there's so much complexity to it. So yeah, but I don't think there's ever been a more prominent time now when people actually can find communities, find support, and find like-minded people online as well as kind of within the areas where they live. So for me, definitely 2020 was actually made me realize how incredible an online community could be to bring like-minded people together. So I think that that kind of sense of innovation is really interesting to me, because it's most of the people that influenced me most during 2020 and those few years of lockdown have stayed firm friends since, and they're all entrepreneurs from all around the world. And I think, but we've never ever met in real time. So I think I think that's one of the things that's amazing, and that's, I think, one of the other things that I was looking at actually is the loneliness that people have that are isolated, and that's also something that affects people's mental health. So I think there's all kinds of aspects. Yeah, but that's my first thoughts anyway.
Thank you. Professor Rob, what do you want to share about mental health and behaviors? Do you believe this for COVID, many people actually face this kind of challenges?
Well, I think everybody does, whether it's themselves or a family member, or you're a manager, teacher, or have any job where you're interacting with people. you're going to face mental health challenges, either in your employees, your customers, your coworkers, your family, your siblings, your children, your spouse. Mental health is a problem that we don't define well. We address ad hoc through the perceptions of others. If you were to look at a technological product, and the technological product was operating badly, you'd be able to dismantle the product into its component parts, analyze the component parts, and repair what was broken. We can't do that with people. Even if we took a person apart surgically, we're not even sure where the mind resides. And all we've come to a conclusion is the brain isn't it. So the difficulty we have is we have no baseline. What is a healthy person? Who is a healthy person? What is our standard of excellence when it comes to mental health that we compare it to? Now, when it comes to physical health, typically we might look to an athlete and say that is physical health perfection, but that person might appear healthy and have cancer growing within them, and we might not even be able to detect that timely. But at least we can get close to what we think a definition of optimum health is: a person that is cancer-free, illness-free, and is physically optimized. With the mind, it's not clear. You can take your most brilliant people, the folks that have IQs in the 160s and 180s, and you can often put them in a class of folks that are antisocial, don't work well with others, may not even be able to do simple tasks like cook food or interact with others. Yet their intelligence is off the chart. And so in that particular case, a high IQ might be an indicator of poor mental health, not excellent mental health. And that's in cross exactly the opposite of how we might look in physical health, where a person that is outperforming everybody else, we might hold up as a standard as an excellent physical example. So our big difficulty in looking at mental health is one, we don't have a good baseline. We don't have a good example of what a perfect person would be. And so we can't even aspirationally focus on what that target is. Now, what we can do is we can identify we may be able to identify what our perfect existence would be, but we don't do it. Think of the one thing we don't teach in school: how to be self-actualized, how to enjoy life, how to look back, how to build a life that when you look back at that life, you are proud of what you've accomplished, and feel satisfied with the life that you've had. We don't teach any of that. When a child comes out of school, they have undoubtedly trained for a job that they've never had. They then work into a career that is suboptimal because they never worked at optimizing it. And often they end their life, even if they're incredibly financially successful, regretting what it is that they did. I still remember going back and talking to one of the wealthiest guys in Silicon Valley after he'd retired, and he was one of the most miserable people I'd ever met. Multiple marriages. The kids didn't care for him. He had yachts and mansions, and he complained that the only people that enjoyed them were his friends, who were all hangers-on, and he couldn't depend on any of them and didn't trust a one of them. But just a miserable existence. I've seen people that are in prisons, and when I was young, I did have my grandfather made a major effort to try to teach me what a perfect existence should be. And so for a summer, I was taken to mental health hospitals, I was taken to prisons, I was taken to farms. I saw illegal aliens working in the fields, living on refried beans and nothing else. But the amazing thing that I observed is sometimes some of those people that were in those awful situations were a lot happier than people that I knew that were very wealthy and should have been incredibly happy. And I think to a certain extent, that was because they took responsibility for their happiness. They accepted where they were and they made the best of it, as opposed to being the eternal victim, that life was unfair, that people were against them. You're handed a lot in life. It is your job, part of your job, to optimize yourself, to find your path to happiness. And I've met so very few people that have taken that up, that actually sit back and spend the time to understand what it is they like, what it is they don't like, what kind of life they would like to have, and then work towards that. Not towards retirement, because you have a life and you go through that life on a day-by-day basis. Another example, but one of my neighbors, one of the highest paid people in Silicon Valley, not on salary, not on options. We include options. He was off the chart. But when it came to salary, he was the highest paid person in Silicon Valley, and he was working towards retirement. His wife was looking for it. They were going to, when he retired, they were going to go off and travel, and they were going to do all these amazing things. And 1 year before he was slated to retire, he'd extended working. He was supposed to retire at 65. He continued to work, making this mammoth amount of money. And then 1 year before he was finally going to sit down, and he and his wife were going to have this wonderful existence that he was going to work for, he got an embolism, the blood clot in his leg from traveling, and that went to his brain. Plane had an emergency landing, but it was too late. He'd fried his brain, and he was dead. And so none of that stuff that he was working for, none of that happiness that he'd been working his entire life and that extended 5 years for, happened for him or his wife, because he was dead. So with regard to mental health, if you don't spend time on assuring, one, setting your own baseline, what would a happy existence be for you, and what does that look like? If you're an extrovert, it's going to be around a lot of people. You're going to be very unhappy under a pandemic kind of situation, and you certainly saw that during the pandemic. A lot of people degraded, students in particular. Kids need a lot of interaction and face time with other kids. You take that away from them. This was a forced experiment, but it was very clear. You take that away from them, and they become dysfunctional. One of the big problems we've got now with Generation Z is they are, by a large extent, they're unemployable. There was just a study completed of managers, and every manager that was surveyed said that they had fired a Generation Z person within 2 weeks of them being employed. They didn't work. They were highly distracted. They couldn't focus. They were non-productive. They were socially difficult to interact with. That they were a problem in the company, and the company doesn't take. And by the way, companies don't take responsibility for mental health. So the company's solution to an employee that is non-functional is to terminate them. And Generation Z employees are being terminated, according to the survey, all over the place at the moment, because they simply can't function. And the theory is the pandemic broke them. They didn't learn the skills they needed to learn when they needed to learn them as they were going through school, because they were all remote, and they picked up horrible habits. Living on their smartphone, living in social media, the things that work against them when they're employed, and when they got the job, they hated the job. This wasn't anything like they'd expected. Their life wasn't anything like they'd expected, and they became non-functional. And the reason is I don't think they knew what would make them happy. I mean, they were content and happy, apparently not working and being on social media, and anything less than that was unacceptable to them, and the end result is they become unemployable. They move back at home, and now their parents are unhappy. They're unhappy, and their mental health degraded. When in the United States, we have a medical program that we've coined Obamacare. And when it was going through its initial funding exercise to make it profitable, the idea was that the young folks who were well would fund the program to a degree that the older folks that had health problems would have their bills covered. The one huge mistake that was made when they analyzed the finances of it was mental health, psychiatric care. And it turned out the younger you were, once Obamacare came into power, the more you needed psychiatric care. The psychiatric expenses blew out the costs, and made Obamacare, instead of being a profitable, at least a break-even medical system, turned it into a very unprofitable medical system, because the very people that were supposed to be contributing to cover the expenses of the aging population were incurring more costs than they were contributing in mental health care. So it fundamentally broke. And now we walked out and we analyzed it and said, well, the problem was that the analysis was done improperly. We done it properly, analyzed the psychiatric costs. But what we should have identified is we've got an entire generation coming up, and these were millennials at that time, coming up that were having severe mental health problems. What the hell was the cause of that? How do we address that and make that and cut down on those costs by addressing the core problem? Nobody focused on that. And now we've got the Generation Z folks that have exasperated the problem coming forward, and to a large extent, a critical mass of them are non-functional. So the end result is as we look at this, we can't look at government to solve this problem. We can't look at business to solve this problem. We have to look at ourselves to solve this problem. And it starts by taking the time to sit down and understand what a healthy you looks like. What would you look like if you had good mental health? And once you've got that in your head, you've got a goal to work for. Whether that's talking to a psychiatrist, better relating with other people, or if you're an introvert, staying the hell away from people. An introvert as opposed to an extrovert is not happy around a lot of people, is much happier by themselves. In fact, the one group of folks, and I'm an introvert myself, I test as an extrovert, but I'm actually an introvert. I've got a weird psychology profile where I present as an extrovert, but I'm actually an introvert. So for me, the pandemic was awesome. I didn't have to be in front of people. I didn't have to be in crowds. I could operate by myself and on virtually, and I was perfectly content. This was like heaven for me. Never even realized it if this hadn't happened. I knew I was an introvert, and I knew I could get stressed out by being around people, but I'd never actually had an experience where years went by where I was largely isolated, and arguably happier as a result of it. The best advice I've got is establish a baseline. Spend the time by yourself or with, if you're an extrovert, with people that you trust, and with the goal of understanding what a happier, better you would look like, and give yourself a goal to achieve that, and do it now. This is not something you wait till retirement to do. You may not make it to retirement. Your life is a fixed set of years that you will not live beyond, and working to have a possible happy future is stupid. And one of the major reasons it's stupid is because if you don't experience that happy future while you're working towards it, you don't know whether it's going to be a happy future at all. One other experience I've had is the number of people I've seen that were very successful in business that died shortly after they retired, and were incredibly unhappy after they retired. They didn't know what to do with themselves. That they had free time, and a lot of times a lot of money, but no idea how to do it. Yeah, they'll spend a few months going out there and playing golf and doing it, but they don't feel like they're contributing. They don't feel like they're making a difference. That they no longer have the power that they enjoyed or the status that was so much of their life, and they are absolutely miserable. Going back to my grandfather again, he was the CEO of a petrochemical company and reasonably wealthy and powerful. When he retired, he became a real asshole for most of the time. His old friends he was hostile to. I'd often find him in his office trying to come up with another invention, another thing, something to make him feel like he was contributing to the environment. And he often lamented that he didn't feel he mattered anymore. That his entire life when he retired kind of went away, and he was miserable. That's not. I mean, think about this. You work your entire life with the idea that you're going to have this idyllic retirement, and you hate the retirement once it arrives. So you have to know what you enjoy. You have to know what kind of a life you want to work towards, because if you don't and you work towards the wrong end life and you achieve it, you're going to be less happy than you were when you were working. At least that's the probability. So you need to know yourself, and we do not spend enough time understanding who we are, what our weaknesses are, what our strengths are, what we enjoy, what we absolutely hate. We don't spend enough time getting people out of our lives that are making us miserable and locating people that we could be happy around. We don't do any of that. I was lucky that when one of my first jobs was working at Disneyland, and I've got to admit, for the couple of years that I worked at Disneyland, up until the end when I actually walked off the job and never returned, were the happiest years of my life. I mean, it wasn't like work, but give you an idea how happy I was, and it really reflected on my family life at the time. Was I would work two shifts a day. I would work one, it was illegal as hell. I would work one shift and be paid, and then I would come back and work another 8-hour shift unpaid, because I was happier there than I was at home. Finally, my manager caught on, and I was barred from doing that. And then they fired my manager because he didn't have a degree and brought in professional management and destroyed the fun of the job. And that's when I walked off it. But it told me that I really wanted to find something that I would do even if I wasn't being paid. If I could find, and that's what I did. I eventually found something and that's what I do. And I enjoy this, and I enjoy, and even if somebody wasn't paying me, I'd still do this. I enjoy it. It's both my job and my hobby and my love. And so I'm not looking forward to retirement. I'm actually kind of dreading it a little bit because I'm not sure what I'll do afterwards. But the nice thing about this job is retirement's up to me. I can go as long as I can go. There are people that do what I do that are in their 80s. And so I've found my path to happiness. And as far as I know, I don't have any major mental health problems as a result. I'm healthy. I'm not suicidal. I virtually never get depressed. If a bunch of things go bad at once, I can get upset, but it's transitory. It's not all about my life, but it's because, and not because I planned this, but I was just lucky enough to have instances throughout my life where I was able to understand what it was I enjoyed, what it was I wanted to strive for, and what it was that made me happy. And as a result, I've been able to achieve that. So when it comes to mental health, just realize it's your responsibility, nobody else's. And if you don't understand what a healthy you is, chances are you'll never achieve it. And you have to spend time to understand what healthy you is. What is your ideal existence? And set that as a goal, not for retirement, but for now. If there are things that you want to do, find a way to do them now. If not when you retire, not 50 years later, find a way to do them near term. If you want to do things with your spouse or your kids, make it happen. One of the I'll close after this to pass the hat. But one of the saddest things that I often see is people that are working really hard, and they don't spend any time with their kids as they're coming up. They have nurses and nannies and daycare and the rest of it. And then they get older and they don't understand how they have no relationship with their kids, and their kids are problematic. They haven't received the mentoring, the close family they thought they were getting when they had the kids, they never got. And it's because their priorities were all wrong. If it's something that you want to achieve, put that priority first. Work doesn't necessarily have to be a priority. It can be. It was for me, but it doesn't have to be for you. So think about your life and think about constantly working to optimize that life against what it is you want to do. And I will guarantee you'll be a far happier and better adjusted, balanced person than you will be if you don't. I'll pass on to Eric.
Thank you. This is excellent analysis. Now I request Mr. Eric.
So, if we look at computer analogy for part of who we are, we're part hardware and we're part software. And, some mental illness comes from the hardware part. There's an incredible complex amount of things that has to happen even to make a single thought. So if your electrical part of that doesn't work right, you can have problems. And of course, if there's any physical part, and that could be lack of vitamins, it could be sometimes food intake can affect people like kids. I know sometimes what they eat can make them unruly kids, and some of those things can be fixed just by diet or by medication. So, part of that problem is making sure that we have the adequate means to identify these hardware problems, like when Rob was talking about Obamacare. You need to consider that in there. You need to make sure the hardware is working right. And the kind of stigma that society has that if it's not working right, that makes you a bad person, and it should automatically work right no matter what. It's one of the deficits, because getting a bodies to work perfectly is always a challenge our whole life. But this part of that is really the programming part. And you've got long-term programming that comes from everybody that the people you're closest to, comes all the time. And a lot of time it's your attitudes. And I think, piggybacking on one of Rob's points, Viktor Frankl learned to be happy in a Nazi concentration camp. He said, it's not about the camp, it's not about the external, it's about your view on life. And he said, you're either basically, in a nutshell, busy living or busy dying in here. So which do you want to do? And if you're going to live, why not have the best you can under the circumstances? So that program means a lot. And one of the challenges we have today, besides the long-term programming, is just the short-term programming. Like a lot of our brain is based on what we see and hear, our senses, and we turn that into stories. So these stories, at best, are partially true because we now have 100% of the information you need. So when we go build these stories, we tend to tell hero stories and villain stories. And this is one of the biggest challenges. If you get a group off by themselves, 1, 2, 3 people, a whole group, a political party, and they start telling hero stories about themselves and villain stories about everyone else, it's very easy to create villains. It's why it's easy to take children away from a family, lock them in a cage, and separate the family for years, because we told our story that it's okay to act like that. We wouldn't do that normally, but they're bad, so they deserve it. And by the way, we get all the credit for everything that's good. So if you're busy acting based on these stories that, for example, if you believe that half the people in America are good, pure, and half the people in America are evil, that's going to make it hard to live together. So the stories that we tell each other can be really instrumental on what we're doing. But I like one of the quotes. I'm trying to remember where I got it. But they defined happiness is what happens in pursuit of a worthwhile goal. And I think Rob was talking about that. You achieve a goal, you go, well, that was great, but now I'm not happy. But were you happy in achieving that goal? So I think the journey is one of the key things, is how do you build your journey? And the other thing that building that journey is, who are you going on that journey with? So I think if you've got a place to live that meets your expectations, for some people, those expectations are really high. For others, they're not that high. I know people living in a van, they're really happy with it. That's their place to live. But I think if you have a worthwhile cause, and my grandmother, when she died, the whole little town turned out, and they had to have over rooms from how many people showed up. And she just always was doing for somebody in that town, little things like having a tea or a baby shower or helping somebody out. That was her journey. And it's who you have it with. Now, one of the biggest problems right now is with people going online, especially young men, is they are devoid of these healthy relationships. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of mental health. We're seeing problems of radicalization because the stories that are being cycled in this limited group of people that don't have healthy relationships is really challenging. So I think we have to be, I think one of the most detrimental things we have is misinformation, because we program ourselves with stories that aren't true, and it teaches us to be unkind to and unfair to other people. But we have to look at the rest of the problem. So I'll go ahead and pass that on. We can talk about this all day. But I think Rob's right when it comes to making a good journey, figuring out what your expectations are. But I think surrounding yourself with a worthwhile goal and with good relationships. So surround yourself by people and things that matter is probably one of the most important things.
Thank you. Madam Ali Rice, what's your concluding remarks or your advice for the people, those who are have challenges for this mental health issues?
Yeah, well, I think one, it's really important to acknowledge that you are having problems and ask for help, so that wherever you get the support, so it could be, in a community or online, but I think just kind of acknowledging there is a problem, and when there is one and when there isn't. So I think because I think there's a quote that mental health's more about staying strong for too long than it is about it's not necessarily a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength to keep going. And as a woman, I run a business. I'm a mother of teenagers, and there's lots of responsibility, and so it's kind of it's a massive juggle, but my priority goes with my kids, and it always has done. And also it's always been really important that I'm there for them. So, and that's probably because when my mum was a teacher and a head teacher and an Ofsted inspector, and on reflection, there's kind of pivotal times when she wasn't there, and I think that's kind of made me overcompensate. So and it's a very individual kind of, it's up to people what they choose to do. But I know when my children look back that they'll know that I was there. So and I think that, and my husband's the same way. Coty is just about to go to university in September, October, and he's a really conscientious, incredibly talented, it's a dedicated, committed young person that wants to do, to follow his dreams. And I think for me that having gifts and talents and pursuing them so that you're achieving, kind of optimizing, all the abilities that you have are kind of crucial. And I think it's a lot of, because I've worked in education for 30 years, there's a massive difference between those that believe they can and those that believe they can't. And that self-belief is crucial, because if you think you can't do something, then you won't. So, it's fundamentally that kind of self-belief. And there's so many adults that haven't had kind of that reinforcement or that confidence to kind of strive to what they can achieve. So they accept, some kind of mediocrity and kind of do a job that pays the bills but isn't fulfilling. And I think the thing is that if we all kind of, if we all actually galvanize to our strengths and realize where our genius lay, it would be, the things that we could achieve would be incredible. So I think, that's my viewpoint. But and the thing is, that's from somebody that has pursued and utilized their gifts, since, I was always an artist, always creative. And suddenly that kind of creative thinking, it's not insubstantial. It's about problem solving and engaging people, and it's kind of project managing and identifying where there's kind of weaknesses or where people need to be to kind of lift their self-esteem and realize that they are able. They just need to to have the confidence to explore and and not be afraid to do the wrong thing sometimes, because it's all about kind of trial and error, really. So I think I think for me, it's all about kind of individuating so that you're confident to be the individual you are. And kind of, instead of being a sheep, realizing that we are all unique and we all have kind of purpose and a reason to be. So that's kind of my philosophy, really. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I request Mr. Rob.
One of the other experiences I had when growing up is I was around a number of folks. Yeah, can you hear me? Can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We hear you.
Sorry.
Yes.
So being around a number of con artists when I was growing up, and I learned a set of skills, and I also learned the kind of person I didn't want to be. But one of the things a good con artist does is they learn a great deal about their mark. And the best way to defend against a con artist is to understand yourself better than they do. Con artists will provide you with a fake dialectic, an argument that will address what you think is important and provide a path for you to get there, and make it so compelling that you won't look underneath their argument with regard to whether it's false or true. And that's how they get you. If you're status motivated, they will use arguments that will suggest that if you do what they say or what they want you to do, that you will gain more status. If you're money oriented, it's more wealth, and often get rich quick kind of wealth. In other words, if you just follow, buy Bitcoin and you could be richer than Bill Gates in a matter of days, or multi-level marketing, which is where you see a lot of folks that use these skills. You form a multi-level marketing store, and then you talk to Bob and Bill and Sam, and maybe you meet George, and George is just absolutely crazy and sells a bunch of stuff, and you make 10% of what George does. And if you get 20 Georges, then suddenly you're making $100,000 a year. And imagine what you can do with $100,000 a year or a month. How about $100,000 a month? See that mansion over there? And by the time they're done, you've got stars in your eyes, and you're not even noticing that they're handing your pocket and all your money's gone. If you can understand what it is that makes you tick, understand how people can manipulate you, you have the best defense against manipulation. More important, you can identify people that are trying to manipulate you and get the hell away from them. Let them target somebody else or turn them into authority so they're taken off the street. But if you don't understand yourself, if you fundamentally don't understand what makes you tick, then invariably, not only are you not going to find happiness, you're probably going to be pretty miserable, but more important, other people will be able to take advantage of you by playing on what they know about you that you do not. And so it's incredibly important, very important, to really understand you. You really are the only person that should be expert on who you are. I'm not a fan of psychiatrists and psychologists for the following reason, because they're often used as a crutch. If you understand yourself first and you go to a mental health professional, they can probably guide you through some things with your help that will make you better. But if you don't understand what it is that makes you tick, spending an hour with somebody isn't going to give them the insights into who you are to provide you with a diagnosis that's likely to help you. Maybe over years, but I've known people that have gone to psychiatrists for their entire life, and they seem to be no better than they were when they started. Now, the thing is it might prevent them from spiraling, but they don't seem to get cured. I have the same issue with chiropractors. And part of that was predicated on the fact that I had an osteopath in the family who was really anti-chiropractor. But if you look at what a chiropractor does to correct a problem, they force back a situation that's broken. But by doing so, they tend to wear the very area that was damaged in the first place, making it more likely the damage will recur. Often I've seen the same kind of problem with psychiatrists and psychologists. They're not really fixing the problem, they're addressing the symptoms, but by so doing, the problem may actually progress. And it's not that they're being dishonest or crooked in their effort. It's because they can't know you as well as you should know you. And if you don't know you well enough, you can't give them the information they need to help you proceed forward. And that's why it's so incredibly important to know yourself first. I went to one psychiatrist. Back when I was a kid, my father and stepmother were convinced that I just wasn't motivated and I wasn't particularly happy. And I've got to admit, I gave you my example working for Disney. I hated home life. I was absolutely miserable at home, and my parents were convinced it's because I was mentally uncoupled. And so they sent me to a psychiatrist, and I had a heart-to-heart with the psychiatrist. And his final comment when I left was, as far as I can tell, you're okay. It's your parents that need to see me. So I went and shared that with my parents and never sent me to a psychiatrist again. But they were twisted. I mean, looking back as an adult, they were just. I won't go into details, but they were absolutely twisted. My father was married 5 times. Most of his wives died. At least 2 of them thought he was killing them, and one of them tried to kill him. So it gives you an idea what my home life was like. So in the end, what it helps is if you can understand yourself, you can understand the people that are with you that make you better, and understand the people that are with you that make you worse and make you miserable, and that you've got a choice. And that choice is you can choose a life to be around the people that make you better. And you can avoid, even if they're family, even if they're close family, even if your parents or siblings, if they are making you miserable, it is not your responsibility to be miserable. Find a better life. It is your responsibility. Your mental health is your responsibility. And the really reason is unlike some medical procedures where you can set a bone and you can sew up a cut, and you can take medications for viruses, and you can take medications for other illnesses. With mental health, there is no magic pill. There's no machine you can put your head in and have the machine fix your head. Not yet. Could be in the future. But do recognize, even if we had such a machine, if you didn't understand what your ideal self was, that machine would make a determination for you and invariably try to turn you into what it thought your ideal would be. And odds are that ideal wouldn't be your ideal. If you don't know who you should be, you will never get there. I think it was Yogi Berra that said, if you don't know your destination, you'll never get there. And that's a good quote to come back. Another advantage I had was when I was at IBM, I was put in the executive advancement program. And in theory, I was in line to be CEO. My chances of being a CEO were slim to none. But that program put you in front of whoever was identified as the best salesperson in the world, the best IT person in the world, the best of whatever career path, whatever expertise you had. We were put in front of whoever the best was, and we heard from them what their idea of the perfect person would be, how to achieve what they achieved in their career. And to me, I'm kind of surprised we don't at least have online teaching like that, where you can hear from the best. And we kind of do. We have TED Talks, and we have a lot of stuff like that online, but we don't have a prescribed course where we take kids through and say, hey, listen, here are the best in the world today. Here's what they think about life. Learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes, and then craft your own life based on their experiences. We don't do that. We could. We have the technology. I'm channeling the $6 Million Man. We have the technology. We could rebuild education to provide that, because unlike when I was a kid, when we really couldn't do closed circuit, I mean, we could, but it was expensive. But taping stuff just didn't scale. Now it does. Now we can stream all kinds of things. I spend a lot of time watching TED Talks, and it's kind of interesting to see what other people's positions are and thoughts are about the world. I learn a great deal, and often I learn a great deal from people's failures. Often more from people's failures than I have from their successes. And I have to admit, I've learned more from my failures than I have from my own successes, because failures kind of tell you what doesn't work. When you have a success, particularly if it's been an easy success, you don't know how you could have failed. You don't know what to avoid. It looks like it was easy. You often look at people that built a successful business and they try to build another successful business and then they fail. And the reason is they never really understood what the difference was. What was it they did that carried forward and made that first effort successful, so they can't repeat it? Where if you see somebody else that had a lot of failures and eventually achieved success, at least in my experience, they tend to be better at sequential successes after that, because they learned what not to do as well as what to do. And so they know what to avoid as well as what they think they should do to be successful. And you need both sides of that coin. You need to learn what it is to avoid and what it is to chase, because if you don't, you're likely going to mix one up with the other and screw up. Often with people in business, and this is recurring, and I can see this in Elon Musk almost every time I've seen him speak, is the fact that he doesn't get that his success had nothing to do with him. His success had everything to do with the people that are around him. Yet he's walked away with the conclusion that he is a god of business and everything he touches will turn to gold. And as we've seen with Twitter, not so much. And instead of supporting and building up a strong team that carry him forward, he's done everything he can to destroy the team at Twitter and pretty much destroy the company, because he doesn't know the goddamn difference. Excuse my French. So learn the difference, learn what works, learn what doesn't, and then decide what it takes to be a better you and work towards that. And chances are you'll achieve it. But even if you don't, the path should be better than you will have otherwise. One other thing to learn, and something that took me a while to learn. are you focused on a conclusion, or do you love the process? My wife actually took this class, I didn't, and she came out with the idea that there are two types of people: people that really like to get to the end, and people that really like the process. And often what happens, if you've got a lot of people that really like the process, they'll never finish an underlying project. On the other hand, you feel like people that really like to finish, they'll finish the project, but it will suck. I mean, the quality will be low. And you could see it when I was a kid, I was building models. I wanted to play with the plane. I didn't want to build the plane. And as a result, the planes I built were built like crap, glue all over the place, all over my hands, all over my room. But I had a plane. And my imagination filled in the gaps. Ideally, what you want is you want to mix people that want the conclusion with people that like the process, so you get some kind of balance. And it's that balance that you want to achieve. Now, I also discovered what I really like is I really like analyzing a problem and coming up with a plan. I hate execution. So that's why I've got the job I've got. I don't have to execute. I'm brought in to look at a problem, come up with a theory and a plan to fix the problem, and then I'm out. I might be brought back in during the process to readjust it and retarget the goal. But I don't have to be there for the years it takes to do it. I can go on to the next problem, which is what really thrills me. And I don't have to spend years, plugging A into B and trying to build something, because I suck at that. But I'm really good at looking at a complex problem and coming up with a theory of how to fix it. So that's what I do. And I'm incredibly happy doing that. It's the kind of self-analysis that you have to do to understand what it is you want to do. One final comment, and I'll pass it to Eric. And I know I've mentioned this before on the show. I had a friend, my closest friend growing up. His father was made and lost a couple fortunes. And he was fascinating to talk to. It was kind of funny. My friend thought my father walked on water. I thought his father walked on water. We probably should have changed places. But one of the things that and my father was a con artist. I'll just leave it there. But anyway, the one of the things he told me is what he would used to do is he'd take the family, they go on a trip through Europe, and rather than going on a tour, doing that stuff, he would just drive, and then they'd stop in these little mom and pop restaurants. He'd go inside and he'd say, "What would it cost for me to rent your restaurant for the night?" And they tell him, and he'd pay him the money. He said, "Close off. I'm going to rent the restaurant for the night." That's during one of his wealthy phases, obviously. And he says, "You guys all sit down and have dinner with us. And we'll all eat together and we'll chat." And he would chat with them about what it is they liked about life, what it is they liked doing, what kids were doing in school. What was it that made them happy? And what he found was almost every family he spoke with on these trips was happier than he was. So in the end, when he was close to death at the end of his life, and he lost another fortune. He was in a motel that he owned. He was basically working as basic labor. He did 120 push-ups every morning, some godly amount of stuff. He was in incredibly good physical shape, and he would cook, he would clean, and he was happy. He was happier in his 70s and 80s, and I think he made 90 than he had been in earlier times when he was far wealthier, because he'd done that work. He found it out that those people were happy because they were working, they were doing something they felt they were contributing with, that they were around people they wanted to be around. They weren't being concerned with meeting budgets, paying payroll, taxes, all of that stuff. Other people were handling that towards the end of his life. He just did what he wanted to do, which is just physical labor, cooking, and exercise, and that's what he did. And his last 10 years of life, I would argue, were far happier than the previous 70. And it took him a while to figure it out, but he figured it out by talking to people about what it was that made them happy, and identifying the things that resonated with him, and then crafting an end of life that was based on that research. And so do the research, talk to people. You see somebody that looks really happy, ask them why. What was it that worked in their life? What didn't? See if any of that stuff resonates with you, and then craft your life based on the research you do on making a better life. But making a better life a priority. It's not about money. It's not about houses. It's not about having Ferraris or Aston Martins or yachts. And for God's sake, never friggin' buy a yacht or a boat. One thing I've seen categorically is that people that have big boats are really, really regret ever having them. But that's a side point. But spend your time understanding what it takes to be happy and set a goal to achieve that. It can be the process, it can be the goal, but if you don't know where you want to go, you'll never get there. Passing to Eric.
So, We talked about the physical challenges that cause for mental illness, and I think Rob has a point there that a lot of time psychiatrists go, let's give a drug or let's cut something out, and even when that is the treatment, it's still very challenging because it's not an easy task to say, oh, this behavior is specifically caused by this physical problem, let's go. That can be very challenging, but the problem is there are lots of some ways to deal with the physical aspects that don't involve drugs or surgery. And so that's one of the dangers is, a workman looks at what they know. It says, I know how to prescribe something or schedule a surgery. So that's something to be careful. But another insight, I think, comes from Jill Bolt Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight, which details her journey when she had a stroke and lost a good percentage of it capability in her brain and slowly gained it back over like 7 or 8 years. The thing that she saw that most of us don't is as her brain came back, she suddenly realized, oh, I have this new capability. And she was able to look at it as it came back and say, well, wait a minute, that's not good. I'm getting rid of that. Other times she would say, oh, that's really useful. I really like that. So she had a chance to, it details the idea that our brains are really made of lots of individual processes and activities and capabilities, and they all kind of work together. So it's not like the brain is all in sync. There's lots of pieces, different parts of the brain, analyzing and deciding and thinking and pushing things together. So there, are what she showed is that there are ways to change the way that not the physical stuff, but the way the brain actually works. And then when it comes down to actual programming, one of the big hits was Psycho-Cybernetics, which kind of talked about the ideas that our brains are programmed by images, and it doesn't know the difference if you tell yourself, I'm really good at math, or whether somebody else tells you really good at math. It takes that as part of the programming. And if you tell, I'm really bad at math, then your brain actually works to make sure that you're really bad at math. So I think the programming that we control ourselves and can influence is a big part of making ourselves who we are. And I think the last part is just picking a worthwhile journey, surrounding yourself with good relationships. Even pets have a big impact. That's a relationship of somebody that always likes you. But I think worthwhile journey and people and things that matter to you, figuring out what those are and surrounding yourself with those, and realizing that you can program yourself and you can search to find and fix any part that is a physical challenge or good thing to know. With that, pass that back to Sharif.
Thank you. This is excellent discussion. I'm sure from today's sessions, our audience can understand about mental health and behaviors. This is very important issues right now. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Besides that, I just want to share that this coming July, we have very, very important conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. We are taking preparations. Lot of universities, thousands of students, political organizations, academy, and a lot of corporation joining to the session, the conference. So hopefully those who join as a speaker, join as a paper publishers or startup or business incubator, they will get a huge benefit from this Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. I request all of our audience, please join in our conference, and those who are interested to visit Bangladesh. I'm sure the day you join in our conference, you get a very interesting sessions and very interesting network and relationship in the business world. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Thank you. Take care.